So welcome everyone. I don't know what month it is. February. This is the February workshop for the Society of Advice. Michael, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's good to
Yeah.
be.
Michael's our first formal, like two-time guest. And that's because these books are so good. Both The Comfort Crisis and this book. You're so, where did the storytelling ability come from?
Well, first, it's good to be a repeat offender officially
For
here.
sure.
So that's
For sure.
awesome. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me back.
Yeah.
Um, and thanks for the compliment embedded in the question. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it is just probably reading. I've always been a big reader, and I think it was especially when I was younger. And I started reading nonfiction, really good storytelling when I was maybe 10 or 12.
Mhm.
And I think that just shaped me. I think that part of it is like that's a really important part of life for learning and picking up cues and thinking. And so it's kind of like the right books just landed on my lap at the right time. My brain was kind of cooking and I just kind of
Yeah.
picked up some things that sat. And then, so there was that. And then, I worked in magazines for most of my career. And so
Mhm.
I had some great editors, and I was just always really drawn to the storytelling aspect of like, I've always, most of my stuff is nonfiction, and a lot of it revolves around psychology and health and behavior. And the reality is that if you want to know the ins and outs of those topics, you can just buy a textbook. But no one does that. It's like, okay, well, why the hell is that? It's because we don't think in just numbers and data and figures and studies. We think in stories. The numbers and data and figures and studies are important, but in order to get people there and get them to care, there needs to be a narrative behind it. So that's just kind of my thinking.
Yeah. Are there anybody you look to for like examples of doing this really well?
I think John Krakauer is really good at
Yeah.
the nonfiction and weaving in history and numbers.
Yeah.
And probably one of my favorite nonfiction books is Under the Banner of Heaven. I
Yeah.
think that book is just like perfectly constructed. It's
Yeah.
one of those that I read it on like a single sitting on a plane because it just propels you forward.
Yeah.
I read a lot of Hunter S. Thompson when I was younger, just because it opens up the possibilities of what you can do with words when
Yeah.
read a person like that.
Yeah.
Tom Wolfe, Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test was really influential with me. And I think that one commonality you see between those three is that they spend a lot of time on the ground embedded with
Mm, mm,
people.
yeah. So
So,
let's just dive in a bit. Let me read from the introduction. So this is directly from the introduction of Michael's book. Why do we suck so badly at moderating? Why do we keep eating when we're full? Why do we keep shopping when we own too much? Why do we keep drinking when we're already tipsy? Why do we scroll social media when it makes, and I want to add a paraphrase, when we know, right, that it makes us miserable? Why do we binge, watch another episode, even when we realize there's a more meaningful life beyond the screen passing us by? Why do we get stuck? Stuck doing the same thing we regret over and over. Michael, let's just sort of dive into this question. How could you give us a sort of just a brief overview of scarcity loops, this concept?
yeah. So the briefest way to put it is that if you want to hook any human or any animal on a behavior, the stuff that we tend to get hooked on, repeat over and over and over, oftentimes eventually to our detriment, by the way, um, it's got to have three parts. So it's a looping behavior. It's got to have opportunity, unpredictable rewards, and quick repeatability. So opportunity, you have an opportunity to get something of value from this behavior. Unpredictable rewards, you'll get the thing of value eventually if you keep repeating the behavior, but you don't know when, and you may not know how valuable the thing is going to be. And I'll give you an example of this that'll land the plane here. And then number three, quick repeatability. You have to be able to repeat the behavior quickly, often immediately. Okay, so that seems kind of abstract, what I just told you, but to understand it, you have to understand like where I came upon this thing. And it's because I live in Las Vegas. And so I'm surrounded in slot machines all the time, right? There's slot machines at grocery stores, at gas stations, at the airport. Of course, the casinos are filled with them. And everyone knows that the house always wins, right? So it's like, why the hell would you play a slot machine? The longer you play, the more you know you're going to lose, the more you do lose. But people play them all the time, like over and over and over. So slot machines are fascinating because they make more money than movies, books, and music combined. Combined. So I get interested. I'm like, why the hell would people do this thing that they know is going to lose them money in the long run? And this leads me to this kind of far out casino laboratory on the edge of town in Las Vegas. It's basically this fully working, brand new casino, except it's used entirely for human behavior research. So I go there and I talk to a slot machine designer, and he introduces me to this concept in a way of this scarcity loop. So let's apply it to slot machines. You got an opportunity to win money, right? Unpredictable rewards. You know, if you could keep playing, you'll win at some point, but you don't know how much, and you don't know how good it's going to be, right? You play a game, you could win nothing. You play a game, you could win $2. You play a game, you could win $100,000, and that's exciting. Those unpredictable rewards hook us. And then you can repeat the behavior again and again. So people play an average of about 900 games an hour on slot machines.
Gosh.
So I learned this, and it like explains the whole deal. And then once you start to look at this loop, you realize it's embedded in all these different things that we do that capture our attention, drive behavior, and often lead us to do behaviors that we regret in the long run. Another example with slot machines, if you won every time you played the game, that would be cool, but it wouldn't be fun, right? It wouldn't be that exciting. It's called a job, right? It's a salaried position. You sit there and you pull the lever and you get a predictable reward. That's no different than working in a factory or working really any salary job, right? You're just performing a behavior on a predictable schedule. And like, how many people are like, God, I'm just hooked on my job at the factory, right? Not that many.
I love those moments in the book where you highlighted that the best parts of the adventures you have been on are the parts you could not have ever anticipated. You know, what do we call that? Type 3 fun. When type 3 fun shows up, I mean, you would never plan for type 3 fun. It's like you hate the experience while you're in it, but you never stop talking about it, right? It's what fills the books. So why is it like I'm now so familiar with this from the adventure perspective that I can tell people I'm taking on trips, here's the agenda. We've outlined it hour by hour. You know, we're going to go climb the Grand Teton. Here is the way we're going. Here's how long it's going to take. And then I can tell them, I promise you, it won't go according to this plan. I just don't know how yet. And I also promise you further that afterwards, your favorite part of the trip will be the surprises. Right? Talk to me a little bit about that. Why is it that we love those surprises so much when they show up, and yet we spend an inordinate amount of energy trying to avoid them, right? Planning around them. And this isn't just about adventure, by the way. This is it for anybody that didn't catch the metaphor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's because in those unplanned moments, you have to work harder and figure things out. You're thrust more into the moment, right? So you've got this plan and you can foresee how it's going, right? And then when things go totally off, your head can't be in the clouds going like, you're on the hike, this metaphorical hike, and you're thinking about your finances and all this stuff. Well, when things go awry, you are forced into the moment because you got to figure things out. One, two, we also know that from years of psychological research that humans value things that they had to work harder to get more. And so I think that those unplanned things, they sort of, one, force you into the present. So you got to be present in order to solve the problem. And then two, you got this problem that you're having to work harder to solve. And then when you come out on the other side of it, you're like, man, that was super rewarding.
Yeah, it's so good. It strikes me that there are parts of our lives that we pay for uncertainty. We call it a different word. We call it surprise. You know, like a plot twist.
Yep.
Rather than getting better at trying to sell certainty, you know, bigger spreadsheets, more complicated calculations, fancier lines, right? Rather than doing that, have you found ways to get better at just sort of surfing uncertainty, like being comfortable in uncertainty, being comfortable, in other words, being comfortable in reality?
Personally?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think for me that experience has always been the greatest teacher for me. You know, I don't really know. I'm never going to understand anything fully until I really experience it. And I've just found that by being willing to put myself in positions where things do go awry
Mm,
and things are uncertain, that I realize that that is, I mean, professionally, I'm speaking professionally about the work I do. I don't know how this applies to
sure.
finance. That's when things get interesting. And that's when things
Mhm.
get fun. And that's when things are going to ultimately be rewarding. So this
Yeah.
one of the mottos I have for all my work is no problem, no story.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I love that.
Like if things go perfect on the trip, you know how good the stories in the book are? They're not that great. They're not that great. You need things to go totally off the rails in order for the story to be great. The unplanned, right? And it's also like you get thrust in the moment, and those are the most rewarding times by far. And that I used to freak out, and now I'm just like things are getting
Right.
good, right?
Right.
Like,
Right. Right. Right.
uh-oh, the fixer totally lied to me in Iraq. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
Now things are going to start to get real interesting. And
Yeah.
so I think being able to have that shift, and I think it comes through some experiences.
Yeah.
For me, anyways, it did. Like, I didn't always used to feel that way. And now it's just like, oh, this is where things are going to get
This is
good.
what yeah, so good. I want to just have Pam and Brian. Brian, can you unmute yourself real quick about your comment, the one way I found? Are you around, Brian?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, what just maybe share that idea. What I'm curious about is when the uncertainty shows up in our own lives or our clients' lives, and like you get hit with it, it's like a cup of cold water in the face. Like you're in a meeting, you don't know, boom, uncertainty shows up. How can we be better rather than denying it, rather than spraying facts and figures at people, like trying to reason with them? How can we get better at being there for them? So just walk us through what you put in the comment, which I loved.
It's a very simple, I don't even want to call it an exercise per se, but it's where am I putting my focus? If I'm looking at my own navel, as I heard somebody say, it's now all about me. I'm gonna trip over my words. How am I gonna walk them through the situation? Do I have the expertise to walk them off the ledge? Do I fill in the blank? Um, and it's all about me and how I'm being perceived. Am I a good advisor or not? But if I can flip my focus to they're here for a reason, they're calling me for a reason. I'm going to explore that. I want to go deep with them. We always say, "Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more." It takes it flips my focus, and I don't understand the neurobiology behind that, but to say it flips my focus, the nervousness dissipates. Um, and I have the ability to be fully present, or hopefully fully present, um, with the client in that situation. The idea of being, I heard somebody say the most interested person in the room. I can't have any control over whether or not I'm the most interesting. I'm not, but I can always be the most interested person in the room.
Mm,
And that allows my clients to feel heard. It gives them space to know that they're fully heard and understood. We're not just dumping facts and figures. We're just spending the time to sit with them,
mm.
um, and go
Love
deep,
that.
fill in the blank, market or otherwise.
Michael, is there anything about that like what's going on in our heads when we shift locus of focus from like locus of control internally to the out like other people? Is there anything there that lands for you?
What I thought about is there's some interesting research from Harvard that basically found one of the number one things you can do to have good conversations and also be more likable is ask better questions. And so then the question is like, okay, well, what makes a better question? And the researchers found that the most powerful questions you can ask are follow-up questions because they signal to the person that you're speaking with that you heard them, that you listened, that we're moving this thing a little bit forward.
Okay, real quickly, Michael, I'm going to pivot real quick. Using the term scarcity loop, do you ever get, there's the opposite side, like an abundance loop. How would you talk about the problems that come up around scarcity mindset, abundance mindset. Like, how are you, it feels to me like you're trying to distinguish because there's an adolescent version, a junior high version of abundance thinking that we see a lot. I know I've seen you on Instagram. Like we all see it a lot on Instagram, like manifesting.
Mhm.
There's like an adolescent version, and you're not pointing at that. So is there any like have you bumped up against that and any clarification you could help us with?
Yeah, so I think of scarcity loop is something that we get caught in that ultimately hurts us in the long run. So, I gave you guys all this examples with slot machines, but if you look at those three parts, opportunity, unpredictable rewards, and quick repeatability, they're in a ton of things that capture our time and attention today. I mean, it's how social media works. It's why people get hooked on email. It's embedded in online shopping. It's in our doom scrolling, right? It's all this like you have an opportunity to get something you think is going to enhance your life. You don't know when you're going to get it or how good it's going to be. And then you just repeat and repeat, whether it's checking your email all the time, whether it's checking and rechecking social media for likes or whatever it is, whether it's the doom scroll, whether it's buying more stuff you don't need. So I see those as most of those behaviors, they all make sense in the short term because you're getting something like people don't do anything that doesn't benefit them somehow, right?
Right.
But we often do things that benefit us in the short term, but then lead us into long-term problems. And so I think when I think of a scarcity loop, that any behavior that has that sort of architecture seems to fall into that for me.
To close, can you just maybe share your favorite story of breaking out of a scarcity loop and turning it into an abundance loop? If you've got a story that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'll give you an example from the book that I think and this isn't my personal one, but this is just, I think, a really good example because, I've been critical of technology. I think all of us have questions about cell phones and how much we use them and how they capture our attention and blah, blah, blah. But there's actually a lot of ways to use them for good. So I'm friends with a guy whose name is John Hankey, and
Mm.
he started the app/game Pokemon Go.
Mm.
So if you're not familiar with it, it's this game where it puts a map on a real world map, and you walk around the real world looking for these fake Pokemon. And it's been downloaded like billions and billions of times. Like it was the most popular app a handful of years ago. People still play it all the time. And when I first saw these people, this was like 6, 7 years ago, walking around looking at their phones, playing this Pokemon game, I'm like, man, these dorks, you know? But then I talked to John and he's like, the reason I designed that game is because my son loved video games and he didn't want to be active outside. So instead of being like, hey, no, you got to go outside and be active, what I did is I go, okay, how can I give him a game that he really wants to play, but sneak in the activity, the being outside and the being with people. So he
Yeah.
created Pokemon Go. And the whole idea is like you're going to be outside, you're walking a ton. You're incentivized to meet up with others to play the game because if you want to like capture a certain Pokemon, you have to have more than one player with you. You're outside the whole time, and people have walked some insane distance, like to Pluto and back and back and back by playing this game. And so it's like, how can you find things to do that hold your attention, that engage you, but that ultimately get you out into the world, doing things that humans evolved to do that still keep us healthy and happy and well.
Mm.
Exercise, time outside, time with other people. How do we sneak that into daily life? Because I mean, I
Mm.
can guarantee if a person has a health problem, has a mental health problem, adding those three things in will usually move the dial significantly.
It's amazing, my friend. I'm assuming you've got to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for spending the time with us. We're gonna stick around and break down everything you said without you here, which would be perfect. I'll send you any feedback.
Yeah, that would be awesome to hear. I really appreciate
Yeah.
you guys having me. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks, Michael. See you, my friend. Okay. So much fun. So much came up for me that I want to just chat about. To me, I look, tactically, like everything we do, marketing, writing books, creating a YouTube channel, starting a podcast, like the advice we give, the first meeting, the ongoing advice, running the business, like actual, to forget being an advisor, actually running the business, finding balance between the lifestyle practice and the growth you want, lifestyle practice and home, all of those things. Like what I love that we're pointing to here is there are tactics for it, and they're really important to know. And we try to get to them. But once we know the tactics, there's still this giant piece of us that is uncomfortable. Like either A, doesn't do it because we're scared, or B, is not sure. And I think this idea with I I think I'm really reckoning with the reality that I can't plan away all the uncertainty. How have some of you have been around a while, and I don't mean around here, just doing this work a while. How have you dealt with the idea that you can't plan away all the uncertainty?
I've been doing this for quite a while, and I would say I have grown comfortable with the uncertainty, to at least to a degree that I think my owning of the uncertainty is actually a stable foundation for clients.
Mm,
Like I carry it for them, and they know if I'm stable, see Scott's nodding too. So if I'm stable about what's uncertainty and what's going on in life and their lives, and I own that, then they get to pass it off a bit. And I
mm.
think that's what I've learned by being around a long time.
Thank you. Shauna, fire away.
This is super quick. It's a tactical
Yeah.
thing. Sometimes, especially in those really uncertain moments, those horrible moments that our clients all go through at some point, it's that, how can I serve you best today? Do you just want to vent about how horrible our healthcare
Mm,
system is
mm,
or what death is like? Or do you want to go to a tactical mode today and we just get in and solve this problem? Because that helps their presence. Let's go back to Mari, right? That's the body check. Because if they're off in their limbic system, it doesn't matter how focused I am. And I agree, like being stable is the best thing I can offer for them because that's what I offer them. If you
yeah.
want to vent, I'm here. I got shoulders, I got ears. You yell at me, you cry with me, whatever you want. Or do you just need me to be tactical? What do you need from me today? And I've seen a good response. So it's a small tactic thing that I'm offering for whatever it's worth.
Oh, I love that. And I would like, if that lands for you, please write it down. It's interesting because I just had this conversation yesterday with somebody on our team that is pretty senior consulting facilitator workshop person at Deloitte. And she uses that exact in her leadership stuff. She used that exact thing with one-on-one, like people who report to her. She'll say, "Hey, today in our meeting, would it be helpful if I show up as uh, an empathetic friend? If I show up as a really skillful technician, right? Or a punching bag, like what?" And she just calls it out and says, "What would be helpful for you today?" Which I love. Here's how we ended up here from Michael's book. What I loved about Michael's new book is that it helped me understand why I'm running from certainty or uncertainty. Why? And I think a lot of what I'm doing that are activities that I want to eliminate. Like when I look at screen time, for instance, just to use that example because it's so measurable, I want to get that down because there are other things I'd much rather be doing. Right. So that's why we ended up here with Michael's work. Okay, so let's just go through real quickly. Any last questions or comments? Tanika, you've been reading. Tell me one that is interesting to you. One of the one things where you're like, oh, that's interesting.
I think I am resonating most with Shauna's comments, and that's definitely how I show up for my clients too. But really kind of leaning into that, being with the person. And Sean highlighted the sort of like today comment about like, how can I be with you today? Like, how can I support you at this moment? And that sort of, reiterates what you said much earlier in the call about just solving for the next local optimum. Basically, is like, all right, we're in this uncertainty together today. What's the next best place that we can go? And just kind of leaning into that more.
Yeah. Thank you. David, I'm curious for you. What was if you had to narrow it down to one insight that you took away from today's call, what would it be?
I'm all about problem solving. In fact, I like the gnarly problems to try to fix. But the real value, and this was brought out in subsequent speakers about, sure, that's great. And we need to also do the hard work of being there and listening to clients when they're having a bad day or the market's down or something like that. For somebody like me who wants to get in and problem solve, if you tell me you got an issue, I'm like, I got a solution. And that's one of the things I've gotten out of listening to people on this call is that it's actually detrimental. You're far better to pull back, listen to everything they have to say before providing solutions. So I saw this as a really valuable tool for somebody like me who wants to problem solve. So I could find out from the client early on, hey, what are you looking for from me today? Is this you want me to solve a problem, or you want to listen to what you're struggling with? And that to me is like a game changer, is to be able to have that. We'll call it a tool for now, is that so that I don't go down the tunnel of trying to find a solution for some problem. If what the client wants is to go, hey, I'm really worried about the market or the election or whatever it is for them that day. So that was rich and rewarding, let's say. One of the things that's been great about Society of Advice is that I really feel re-engaged in what I'm doing in the world. And so this has provided an opportunity to really work on that with other people that are cutting edge. The quality of hanging out with Society of Advice people is miles apart. Yeah, well, you're expected to know the spreadsheet part of this business, but unless you really work on getting to the emotional side of this business, which, by the way, I agree with you, comes from working on yourself. So if you want to be a better planner, be a better human. So what this has allowed me to do is be re-engaged in that, about being a better planner, being a better human.
Hey, it's Carl. Getting stuck in scarcity loops causes huge problems in our lives, in the way we run our businesses, and in the work we do with clients. Well, we found solutions to that problem in our recent workshop with Michael Easter at the Society of Advice. In fact, you just watched a short clip of that workshop. As a group, we came up with specific tactics and mental models to get ourselves and our clients out of what Michael calls scarcity loops. I know that you will find this workshop incredibly valuable because it will change the way you run your business and the way you work with clients. At the Society of Advice, we hold a workshop like this each month, focused on solving the most important challenges that you face as an advisor and a business owner. I am positive that you would love it, but you don't have to take my word for it. Join and find out what hundreds of advisors already know. In fact, I've made it risk-free because when you join, the first month is on me. Your first month is free. That will allow you to attend a live workshop and also see the recording of the most recent one as well. Now, giving you the first month free is actually not a sales tactic. The truth is, the value of the society is really hard to describe, but easy to see when you experience it. So come and see for yourself. Simply go to thesocietyofadvice.com and join now. That's thesocietyofadvice.com. I'll see you on the inside, my friend.